This is the Business of Apps podcast, bringing you actionable insights from the leaders of the global app industry and the world's fastest growing apps. You can find more app news, data and analysis over at businessofapps.com.
Welcome to the Business of Apps podcast. On this show, we invite app industry professionals to cover various topics. We promise to do our best to keep it both insightful but brief. In this episode, we have Eric Crowley, partner at GP Bullhound. Eric, welcome to the Business of Apps podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much, Art. It's great to be here.
Thank you for coming this sunny Friday. All right, let me set the stage. On this podcast, we have app marketers, developers, advertisers, experts in various areas of the app industry. All these people share their experience, gave their take on challenging questions, share their dreams and hopes for the industry. Today, we really want to give you a perspective from somebody who is, in my opinion, in the best position to give us a bird view on the app industry and talk about where we are and where we're going to. Eric will cover multiple bases, giving us the highlights from the Consumer Subscription Software Report issued by GP Bullhound Investment Bank recently. But before doing that, please tell us about yourself, Eric.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Art. So as everyone heard, my name is Eric Crowley. I'm a partner here with GP Bullhound. We're a tech investment bank, but we'll talk about them in a second. I'm originally from Ohio here in the US. Grew up there for quite some time. First job was actually driving a truck outside of, for Cintas, outside of Cleveland, Ohio. And then went and got my MBA at the University of Chicago. And then that's what put me on the finance path, where I spent a couple of years at Lazard doing M&A and restructuring. And then ultimately made a foray into tech by becoming the CFO of an educational technology company called eSpark. And so that was educational software on a SaaS model that we sold into the US K through 12 system. Really challenging business. So ultimately got recruited to come back to banking with GP Bullhound. And I've been there now for about 5 years, working on technology, M&A transactions, and currently live in the Bay Area. I've got a really great big German Shepherd and a very tiny little daughter. So I'm a very lucky man.
All right, that's great. For the sake of the audience, we may hear a little bit from these awesome doggies, but we may not. Who knows? Here we go. Now, what is GP Bullhound today? Tell us about your investment bank.
Yeah, so we're a pretty unique animal in the investment banking landscape. So we were founded about 20 years ago. We're about 220 people today. So we've grown nicely, steadily. We're owned by our partners, right? So we're kind of internally owned. We're not publicly traded. So we are only a tech investment bank. So we do not raise, we don't go out and do IPOs. We don't do restructurings. We focus on M&A and capital raises for technology companies only. And so we've got 9 offices around the globe, headquartered in London, offices in most major European capitals, Berlin, France, Paris, Madrid, Stockholm. And then we've got New York and San Francisco for our offices. And so we primarily focus on the middle market. So companies between 50 million and $1 billion is our sweet spot. And then we recently have kind of started to do some more stuff around the venture side. So we actually have venture capital that we invest ourselves. And this is money we've raised from ex-clients and the partners here at the firm. And so we're very aligned with our founders when we do invest, and we try to get to know them on a very personal level. And we've invested in companies like Slack and Discord, Busuu, which is a language learning app that we sold to Chegg, a company called Fishbrain, which is a fishing CSS business. We are one of the original investors in Spotify as well, all the way back in the day. So we've got a deep history in this consumer subscription app ecosystem.
Wow, we had Fishbrain a couple dozens of episodes before, but I remember the interview. She was great. The Fishbrain is the concept. It's just awesome. And yeah, who doesn't know what Spotify is? Like the reason why Apple Music exists, to be honest.
That's exactly right.
How do you see the current state of the app market? I'm asking because, we've been hearing that the recession is around the corner. This phrase is like, within 5-6 months, it should be here, just getting ready for it. And that's far from the only big problem we have in this world. The invasion of Russia of Ukraine and the bloody war that is happening there, climate change and everything else. So how do you see the app market in all this?
Yeah, it's an interesting space right now. There's absolutely deals getting done. So at GP Bullhound, we'll close 2 deals this month that are app-based businesses. that are being sold to fantastic buyers, right? Not distressed prices or anything like that. So the way we describe it, Art, is it's a little bit of a barbell market. There are great prices being paid for great companies at any time, right? Even if there's a recession, if it's a great business, someone will pay a great price. So we're absolutely seeing deals happen on the right side of the barbell. And then, there's always people that are saying, hey, I need to sell now. I'm starting to run a little low on money. Hey, I'm just tired of doing this. I'm tapped out. I'm exhausted. I want someone else to take over. And so there's deals like that happening at the left side of the barbell. What you're seeing now is kind of starting to hollowing out in the middle of the barbell, which is, companies are just kind of plodding around, they're growing 10, 15% a year. That's where those deals are tougher to get done these days, because investors are really looking for two things: growth and profitability. And so if you don't have both of those elements, it is a little harder to get a deal done these days. That being said, the quality of the app market is better than I've ever seen it in my entire life. So if you flash back to the history of the app market, right, the initial things were truly apps. They were just small little widgets sitting on the phone. They didn't connect to a lot of services or other devices or sensors. It was, small calculator apps or a voice recording app. And now I don't even like the term app, right? Because an app is really just a portal into a business service that is being offered to a consumer. And that app, which is really a service, right, connects to thousands of other sensors and data points, pulling in from information off the web, information like your GPS off your phone, off your Apple Watch, your heart metrics, your weight, anything, your BMI. And they quickly are moving from just being an app, as people call it, to truly digital services that one of their main channels to connect with the consumer is an app. So it's kind of a long way of answering your question, but it's still very robust.
Yeah, that's for sure. For people who are listening to this episode, next Monday, you will definitely be knowing that Twitter has changed, was just acquired by Elon. That happens. So huge acquisitions do happen these days.
Yep, big news here in SF. That's in San Francisco. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's if you open the Twitter, you'll see Elon being trending for a while. Yeah, that's a brave new world for all of us. And yeah, if you remember those slogan from Apple, there's an app for that. It was really catchy back in the day, but at some point, Apple realized there's no room for that slogan anymore. People there are new apps were coming, but the ecosystem shifted towards big platforms that are not just apps anymore. Okay, from your perspective, what app category do you see most dynamic and promising today?
Yeah, so we kind of look at the CSS landscape and kind of put businesses, and we call it consumer subscription software. So if I say CSS, it's consumer subscription software. We kind of put them in a couple different categories. So there's obviously entertainment, which we're all familiar with: Netflix, Spotify. There's fitness, which is very popular, right? Peloton has done some great stuff, Fit On. And that includes like outdoor hiking, like All Trails or Strava. Then you've got prosumer, which are categories people are using to do work. So this includes a company like Speechify, Superhuman, really interesting consumer subscription plays. And then you've got health and fitness, which is very interesting. That'd probably be one health and wellness, Art, which is something that includes femtech. It includes meditation, it includes mental health, connections to health professionals. So that space is very hot. And then wealth management, which is kind of like we call like a little bit of the financial management piece, is really interesting right now. I think with the markets kind of going up and down, consumers are saying, hey, I've got all these different accounts all across, all these different platforms. No way to truly manage that outside of like an Excel spreadsheet. So that space has become really interesting for us right now. And then there's a host of other stuff which we see that's coming up really quickly, and that can be stuff from like religion. We've seen everything from like really great plant management apps. So like a company called Greg has had a great run where they are helping consumers manage their plants. Right? When you water this plant, what type is this plant? Is it sick? Is it healthy? So there's just really cool businesses constantly being created. So if I had to answer a question succinctly, which I did not, I'd probably say like the prosumer space is probably our most interesting space today.
Yeah, I do remember this nice summary by Kara Swisher of Pivot, my favorite tech journalist, that used to be a time when entrepreneurs from Silicon Valley were chasing small ideas with big money. That time has gone. We're chasing for big ideas with big money. That's the way of doing that. That's great.
Totally agree.
We live in a very dynamic world, and the app industry mirrors its rapid changes. Your app growth depends on new knowledge and skills like never before. This December, one and only Berlin will open its doors for app marketers from all corners of the world. Go to apppromotionsummit.com/Berlin to register and be part of it. What obstacles and roadblocks do you see for the apps industry growth at the moment?
Yeah, there's probably the biggest thing is app tracking transparency, right? ATT rolled out. There's no way to put it differently. That was a huge hit to the space.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
People had built very efficient marketing models, attribution models, retention, and that broke, and it broke in a big way. And so I kind of view it as short-term pain, long-term gain. Right. So a lot of app marketers, businesses have gotten hooked on cheap mobile ads, right? Through Facebook, through IronSource, through a host of different players. And they're using that to drive installs. But the reality is those installs and any subscriptions that would come for that were generally lower quality than like your true passionate fans. And so what I say when I think it's a long-term gain is it means that marketers and founders, entrepreneurs are going to have to reset, and they're not going to be focusing on high flashy download numbers, right? They're going to be focusing on steady Eddie subscriber numbers, and then more importantly, retention numbers. And that's ultimately how you build a better business is doing it that way. So that's probably the first major headwind. And then, obviously the second one, and we talked about a little bit, is just the recession, right? If consumers feel a little less wealthy, they spend a little less, right? And so they may not subscribe to as many entertainment apps. That being said, though, if you're an app that provides a service to someone cheaply, affordably, and makes their life better, you become an affordable luxury. And in recessions, generally, people just trade down from buying the really expensive purse or the new car, and instead they get something that's affordable and helps their day-to-day life. So I think there's an opportunity for people there to have some big winners.
Yeah, I would say there's a bit of a perfect storm because on one hand, just like you said, this looming recession is coming. On the other hand, there is so much money in your wallet you can spend on subscriptions, and when you see so many great titles from Amazon Prime, Netflix, Hulu, etc., but as much as you'd like to watch all of them, you cannot spend hundreds of dollars on subscriptions, so the competition grows really steadily. So yeah, and it remains to be seen how what the outcome will be in a few years. How many subscriptions for video content will be still having
Absolutely
on a basis. And now, when your investment bank evaluate a new app, how do you assess its potential for growth? And specifically, what KPIs do you need to know to make a decision?
Yeah, so we've developed a framework that we call the CSS flywheel. And for anyone listening, this is all available for free on our website. Our CSS reports are free to download. Just go to gpbullhound.com and insights, and you'll see everything we're talking about here. But so the first thing we look at is less of a KPI art and more of like, what's their moat? What's the content, right? So like, because a lot of the how you deliver the app or the service is kind of the same, right? It's through the phone. But the important thing is, what are you delivering? Is it really unique content, or is it like an also ran content where it's something that anyone can copy and quickly replace? So like, what's your moat? And then what I next look at is, what kind of data are you ingesting, and then aiming that data at your content to make it more personalized, more customized, more unique to the actual user. And so that's really important to me, right? So if you're not ingesting any data and using it to enhance someone's profile or their experience or customize it, it reduces the moat. But then we get more into the KPIs that you were talking about, right? Dollars and cents. And first is like, how do you acquire users? So we look at organic versus paid acquisition, right? How many of your subscribers come through organic means, right? Your own channels, right? Something you own that you pay nothing for. And then how many are coming through paid channels? That percentage is really important. We like to see a lot of our clients have north of 50% organic customer acquisition. So once you get much north of 50 paid, it starts to get really expensive. Then we look at monetization and pricing, right? How do you price your product? That obviously ties into LTV. So if you think about that, if you're pricing it for $1 versus $100, your LTV is wildly different. And I do think one thing entrepreneurs should focus about, we talked about this in our last report, is pricing, right? It's really easy to say, okay, I price it at $29.99 because that's what everything costs in the app store. So simple, easy, don't think about it. But in reality, the difference to you personally of pricing at $39.99 or $35.99 versus $29.99 is nothing, right? And people are paying through Apple Pay, so they're barely price conscious. They're just trying to decide, is this worth to pay for or not? And so we look at pricing and monetization really importantly. Then we look at if it's a niche user base or a TAM, a large TAM, right? Are you going after fitness, or if you're going after plant aficionados based in the Northwest part of the US, right? It's very important to understand who your customer is, and that really helps us understand what your retention is going to look like. And then that's the last category, which is churn and retention. So this is probably one of our most important ones, even more important than revenue growth, which is how long do your customers stay with you? And that proves, one, product market fit. It proves that every month, every year, when they get that resubscription notice, they're saying, hey, I'm getting value. And to me, that's a great signal of like whether the business and the service is a high quality. So those are kind of the areas we focus on, Art.
That's pretty nice 360 degrees picture on the app and its potential to growth. Just for the sake of the audience, CSS does not deter from HTML. It stands for Consumer Subscription Software. People are not familiar with this term. We're just using it constantly, just so they know. All right. So, generally speaking, all app users can be attributed to these two categories or two buckets, whichever you prefer. Ones who bring you a small value, come and go, and the other ones who are really sticking to the app and investing a lot. Can you talk about the mindset of our brands that they should have with respect to this too?
Yeah, so we wrote about this in our 2021 report. We call it tourists and locals, right? To use an American term. So tourists are people that we use a ski resort as an example, right? They flip in, they stay for a couple of weeks, maybe a day or two. They try a bunch of stuff and then they leave, and they rarely come back. And locals are people that live there, right? They're there every day. They engage highly. They care about the success of the region, of the tourist destination, right? They want it to be successful. And so then they contribute more. And so what we've done is we published this report, and we kind of talked about, hey, it's easy to chase downloads, right? Really sexy number. It's an easy thing to track when you're saying, hey, I spent $1 million on Facebook and I got 1 million downloads. Awesome. $1 per download, right? But then the real important thing is how often do people subscribe? Right. So what's your activation rate of those downloads? And that's where people generally stop focusing. And so we've really said, hey, you should really understand not just where you did get the most downloads from, but where you ultimately get the most subscribers from. So tracking the user all the way from attribution, like what channel do they come through, to they actually subscribe and retain. Right. And that's hard. A lot of people, you have multiple different systems. It's hard to understand exactly the performance of different channels. So like companies like RevenueCat, ChargeBee are starting to do really nice work around this now, where you can follow that user all the way through. And so what we always do is encourage people to say, hey, if you're going to grow 10% less, but you're going to retain 10% more, that is a way better business. Way better business to retain 10% more. And so helping people focus on understanding who those locals are, what are they using the service for, what are they using the app for, what gets them excited about this? Why have they not churned is always a really great question to ask people. Was it just apathy? Or do they really find something super interesting here? Asking your users those questions are really important. But then that's how you build big, successful businesses, hiding in plain sight. We've seen some really cool stuff that way.
Yeah. By the way, RevenueCat is another great guest on this podcast. They're just awesome in what they're doing for app developer community. I think this distinction between people who are not spending a lot and who are investing heavily was first pioneered in the game space. People who are into gaming know for sure that there are people who are not willing to spend any money, and there are so-called whales. People who spend so much, just like in somewhere in casino in Vegas, people can spend staying next to the slot machine for hours and hours. These kind of category of people who are spending a lot in games, but these two categories, two huge buckets, they are not limited with game space only. They're existing in every app category. You just have to be mindful of these two categories, and just like Eric said, be really mindful about your strategy. How do you make the most of the people who are sticking to your app, and how do you monetize this audience?
Yeah, it's a great metaphor, Art. And the way to think about it in the subscription space, which is, I pay the same subscription amount as you do, even if you use it 10 times more. So, but to determine if you're a whale in the CSS space, we think about engagement, right? If you think about an All Trails, an app, right? How often do you hike and record a trail, post photos, make the platform better, right? How many of you did you connect a Garmin device or an Apple Watch to it? So like it makes the hiking that much more accurate. So when we think about whales in the CSS space, we think about people that have really high engagement and are making the platform better by posting content, right? So that free, lovely user generated content that everyone loves. So that's how we think about the whales, but it's a great metaphor.
Oh yeah. Let's bring some numbers. Let's talk about subscription renewal rates. What is it? And can you give me some numbers for different app categories?
Yeah, so we actually did something with this with Revenue Cat. Actually, not to give them another shout out, but they've got amazing data, and so we partnered with them in our research report this year to truly understand, what are renewal rates, what are good, okay, and great renewal rates look like across different categories. So, as everyone knows, like health and fitness, there's tons of solutions out there, right? And so, when we looked at it, generally on an annual subscription, health and fitness can be anywhere between 17% and 36%. Best in breed subscription business, including health and fitness, will have a first year renewal of north of 60%, right? So that's really great, is north of 60. And then we've seen other things like education renewal rates of somewhere between 23 and 40% first year. And then the category we kind of talked about that were really exciting is this prosumer category, right? And they have renewal rates of between 18% and 45%, which is really great. And then, so I think then it kind of goes up and down different categories, right? Photo and video editing. Sometimes people use it for a short-term solution. They just need to fix one little project. So they have renewal rates of like 17% to 30%. So we've got all this in our CSS reports. You can see all the charts and graphs. But yeah, the way we think about it is okay retention is anything below 30 on an annual basis. Good is anything kind of like 30 to 50. And then great is something north of 60% on first year.
Gotcha. We'll put the link to the report in the description for this episode so people can check it out themselves.
Yeah, it's page 22.
All right. So you can get those straight. Well, now, what new app user acquisition channels marketers should know about? Probably haven't heard about them yet.
Yeah, it's a really good question. We talked about this last year because the way we were thinking about it, we talked about this earlier, which is paid versus free, right? Organic channels versus paid channels. And so everyone's heard of Google. Everyone's posting stuff on LinkedIn, the App Store, right? Google, like LinkedIn, Facebook, all pretty common. Instagram. Obviously, the last 24 months have been big for TikTok. We have some CSS clients that are doing phenomenal on TikTok. The one thing with TikTok, it's really hard to win, right? It's easy to get a lot of views. It's hard to get retention and engagement because people are just quickly scrolling past things. And you got about 3 seconds to get someone's attention. That's really tough. So, but where we've seen really fascinating channels from people has been one, podcast. That's been really powerful for people. We've seen Reddit become a powerhouse. And the reason is if you get your app to become loved within a Reddit community or Reddit forum, all the users will talk about it and they will all try it. So those are very passionate forums where people care about one very niche topic, right? A Reddit forum could be 1,000 users, it could be 10,000 users, it could be 1 million users, but that's become very powerful. We've seen YouTube become a big pickup for a lot of people. And so like posting videos, getting people to see how the app's being used has been really powerful. I don't know if you're watching any of the artificial intelligence, like the Jasper AI YouTube videos. They are incredible. And then the last thing I'd probably mention is partnerships. So going offline into real life and partnering with, certain retailers that are, kind of friends of yours, like working with the travel industry to say, hey, if you're traveling to Italy, here's a free subscription to Busuu. And so there's a bunch of different ways to get offline and find ways to track people exactly the time where they might want to make a purchase.
Yeah, Reddit is a great example of how you can make your app to tap the power of word of mouth, like in a big way. It's your basically ticket to get your app viral if you manage to find the community of people who are really into your app and what it provides to them.
Yep.
Now, because of your perspective on the market, I think you're the best person to ask this question. When it comes to selling an app or fundraising for it, how app owners should prepare for these steps?
Yeah, it's a good question. We talk about this literally every day. It's my day job. The first thing is just truly understand why you want to sell or raise capital, right? Let's assume both of those. So are you trying to get a check and kind of de-risk, like, maybe take some of your net worth out of your only business? Are you trying to find a partner, someone to come in and bring money? to help grow the app, but you're going to stay on and keep running it? Do you want to sell out, take a check and sail to Bermuda, right? Never touch technology again. So all those questions, we really ask people to understand, like, don't just do it because it sounds cool, right? This is a 3-6 month process of a lot of work. Only go into it if you truly know what your objective is. And it doesn't just have to be money. It could be a lot of other things. So that's step one, is really just understand what you're getting yourself into. Step two is be organized, right? Make sure you have all your legal documents done. If you have employees that have options, make sure those are papered, they're detailed, right? You've got a clean cap table, right? So it's easy for people to understand who owns what. Make sure you're not running afoul of any regulatory issues, right? With GDPR, data collection across like California, the EU, the US, it's really hard. So spend the time to make sure your privacy policies are up to date. Make sure your users have all kind of selected yes to the current privacy policy. That's all stuff you could do kind of in the background. And then, then we kind of think about positioning your business across all the other apps and services that are out there, right? So that's a lot of the work that GP Bullhound does. So if someone comes to us and say, hey, I have a fitness app, to be successful, right? It's really hard to get a deal done. We have to understand why you're unique, why you're different, why will you be better and bigger than you are today, right? So helping us understand that story really comes from listening to the entrepreneur. And then finally, it's just the financial detail, right? The user detail is really important, almost sometimes more important than the financial detail, but having that really tied down, right? So I could say, hey, how many subscribers did you get in January of 2017? Right. Having that data at your fingertips makes the entire process way easier, because it's much harder to go back and find data that has been lost through the sands of time than it is to have it all up front and be crystal clear and scrubbed. So those are generally my thoughts, but it's a lot of pre-homework is the best way to think about it.
Gotcha. These are awesome suggestions, Eric. Now we've covered the major topic on the table, and I have just a few quick questions. I asked more than 100 people on this podcast before, and now it's your turn. This is the way for me to let audience who are listening to this podcast, to know my guests just a little bit better. So what smartphone do you have now? Have you been switching between these two giants or staying one side?
Yeah, I've been an Apple user since it came out. And I think it's because I have so many apps, because that's what I do for work. It would just be an absolute pain to switch them back and forth between Apple and Android. So I have the latest iPhone.
All right. Can you remember what was happening before the iPhone? What was your first mobile phone?
Oh yeah, I had a Singular wireless touch phone. So I don't remember the name, but Singular Wireless was previously spun out of AT&T and then bought back by AT&T here in the US, and that was 2002 was my first smartphone, or my first cell phone.
Gosh, I obviously cannot remember those days. It was not even my radar back then.
Good for you.
No.
I'm very old.
Imagine you're back to present. Imagine you left your smartphone, your iPhone at home. What will be the most missing feature for you when you're out?
Yeah, for me, I think it's messaging. I like to stay in touch with friends and family, so I use WhatsApp and iMessage pretty consistently throughout the entire day.
Probably when you once in a while pick up your iPhone and think, would it be great that thing can do this or that, hardware, software, not necessarily more, probably more balanced. Anything? What do you think this thing is lacking at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, if you had asked me if I had a magic wand and what could I do with it?
Yeah,
I would shut down all smartphones for 2 hours a day between the hours of like 4 and 6 p.m. And people got to go outside and talk to others and engage in real life. So kind of like a global happy hour. You can't tweet about it. You can't post photos. You can't take a picture. You just got to exist with your friends and family and do something between 4 and 6 every day. That would be my magic wand app feature. So if Tim Cook's listening to the podcast and he wants to set that up, just have him give me a ring.
Yeah, I think I think it would be suicide for Apple or some other company that sells smartphone, but selling boxes to seal off your smartphone for a while would be great, but I don't think they're in the business of doing that. But anything else, on the hardware or software side that would make it happen, it would be really awesome to have. I would completely agree with you.
Yep.
All right. Before I let you go, very final question. How can people get in touch with you and get more information about what you do?
Yeah, well, as a technology bank, we're kind of all over the internet. So you can easily go to gpbullhound.com, and that's got our research. Download it for free. Take a look at it. We love contributing to the ecosystem in that way. And then to get in touch with me personally, it's just my email is eric.crowley@gpbullhound.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, and then I'm on Twitter @crowxu. And pretty active there as well. So always responding to DMs and messages from people that come in.
Terrific.
Don't hesitate to reach out. I love chatting with people. Even if you don't think you'll be a client for 10 years, we still love talking to people.
That's awesome. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for coming on the show and spending time with us. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Art. It was a pleasure.
And that was my Eric Crowley, partner at GP Bullhound. To listen to more episodes, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts. Just search for Business of Apps and you will find us easily. Remember, we release episodes on Mondays. So subscribe and you will be able to get new episodes on your smartphone, tablet, or computer as soon as we release them. And please don't forget to leave us a review or comment on iTunes. It is highly appreciated. And all episodes will also be available on businessofapps.com. Thank you for listening. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Business of Apps podcast. For more, head on over to businessofapps.com.